Alright, so now we're going to get started on the rear brake. Now, as I've mentioned before, this pedal will not move even if I put the weight of the world on it. So I'm going to assume that, like the front master cylinder, this one is probably also frozen in place. Unlike the front, this one was probably frozen when it was in a fully open position. So hopefully, instead of the piston being way up in the cylinder itself, it might actually be kind of out there already, and I may hopefully have to just get a pair of pliers and pull it out rather than use WD-40 and a screwdriver and a hammer and knock it from the other side. Now I've already disconnected the rear brake, as you can see. It was a 12mm 12mm socket for this side, which means it's going to be a 12mm socket for this banjo bolt. And then right here, I'm going to have to take this off so I can get this out and replaced. 8mm for this, 8mm for this, and then this is going to come out and get replaced with steel line tubing. I will get back to you once I get all this off. I'm probably going to take these off as well, just take the whole assembly out. I don't really know how I can get the master cylinder out with the exhaust in the way, and I'll let you know what the sizes are for these when I get back to it. Alright, so just like a lot of things on this bike, it was a little bit more of a pain in the butt than it should have been to try and get the rear set off, but I was able to do it. That was actually the easy part. The hard part was this right here, which I'll get to in just a second. So the rear cylinder itself mounts on by 2 bolts right here, mounts onto the master cylinder by 2 other bolts. These are both 8mm. There are 2 5s right here. I used a really simple attachment. You can probably find it's a Harbor Freight socket to Allen. Made it really easy, really simple, didn't need to pull out any extra tools. Now for this guy, as you can see here, it's got this little winding piece. It goes into this right here. Goes right through there. And I didn't really have to use the winding piece a whole lot, because really what's keeping it connected is this little spring, which of course just came out. So the spring is what clips on right to the bottom of it here, and then it hooks on to the bottom of the master cylinder, and every time you push down on the pedal, it'll help it go back up so the brakes aren't always automatically engaged. It's a pretty simple trick. Even after 30 years, I'd say minus a little bit of rust on the spring, it's still quite springy. So I think I'm going to keep it. I had to use a pretty specialized tool just to make my life easier. I have no idea what this is called. It came with my aftermarket exhaust. It's just used to grab the little hook or hook the spring, pull it, and then kind of wiggle it out. You can probably use a screwdriver to get it done. But if you have that tool, or if you know where to get that tool at, I'd highly recommend it. Now, as for the master cylinder, it was a little bit tougher. It has a 5mm right up here that doesn't want to move a whole lot, and then for the bottom one it was a little bit bigger. I want to say it was 12mm, and I'll correct that in the description if I'm wrong. Then on the rear set, it had another bolt right down here. Now if you'll notice, in that little hole there's not a lot of working space, so I couldn't really go down in here, right in here, and use a wrench to get it loose. So what I had to do is, because there's a piece right here, and there's another one right down here. The point of that is to lock them together, so then you can adjust this top one, the 5mm, without having the whole thing just unthread itself. I used it the opposite way. I took this bigger one, moved it all the way to the top to lock it up here, and then as this whole piece spun around, I was able to get this last little guy to just fall right out. And that's how I got the full rear set disconnected from the master cylinder. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but when I see a locking nut, and I see it on one side, but I want to have it on the other side, I just move it up and suddenly it becomes a locking nut for the master cylinder. And that's how I got that off. Next steps is I'm going to get this hose off, and then I'm going to get this fully disconnected. You'll notice it has 2 connections. This goes to the rear caliper, this goes to the reserve. So I'm going to have to go back, take the gas tank off, which is already just kind of sitting there. I'm going to have to pull out the reserve filter, or not filter, the reserve cylinder, and drain all that brake fluid out. Otherwise, as soon as I do this, it's going to start leaking brake fluid everywhere. And I'll get back to you after I get that all done. Alright, so I got the fairing off. I already explained how to do it in a different video, so I'm not going to go over it too much in length here. It might be a little bit easier on my bike than with someone else's bike if you have a full set of fairings. Mine were cut right there, so I don't have to worry about taking off the front fairing. Basically, just some 5mm, 8mm, maybe some 10mm. Take off the top piece right here where there's a little screw hole. Then take off a piece right in the back, then there's one right up there. You also need a screwdriver for some of that. Pretty simple, easy, straightforward. For this guy, 110mm holds this reservoir to the tube itself. Then I'm just gonna snake it right down to the bottom. This piece with the spring on it connects to the electrical system to tell it when to turn on the brake light. So I want to be really careful not to mess that up. So I have an extension on my wrench, as well as an adapter because it's not quite the right size. I'd recommend adding an extension, just because there's not a whole lot of room for your hand to work with right in there. And it's just better to be safe than sorry considering how old these wires are. I don't want to try and have to find a replacement. So I'll get that off, and I'll see you on the next section. Alright, so I just need to point out for a second, I got it out really easy. This is definitely the OEM brake fluid, though. I don't know if you can tell. That's a solid layer right on top. There's definitely some fluid in there. I'm poking at it a bit, and it's like that solid top to pudding before you break through it and get into the actual more liquidy stuff. So I just had to point that out for a minute. This whole system is going to need to get some cleaning done on it, and I'm not surprised that the lever was not working. This is some very done brake fluid. It's had its time, it's done its time, and it's ready to go. Alright, I take back everything I literally just said. Turns out I'm a bit of a dummy. That was actually a rubber cover for it. There isn't a whole lot of brake fluid, and it's just about as disgusting and soupy as the last one. Not as much crystallization on the bottom, but definitely looking like it was the OEM. It was so far below this little line for the minimum line, and there's such little left that it's going to get flushed, and I might just replace this plastic piece because I'm not sure I can give it the proper cleaning it needs. Either way, I'll let you know how the results of that go. Just wanted to post that quick update. I'm a bit of a dummy. That was rubber down there. That wasn't actually the top of the fluid. And I'm probably going to want to get that rubber piece replaced. I'd recommend for anyone, I looked up on Revzilla the price to get the front piece. There's a rubber piece on the front replaced. I think it's like less than $5. It's worth it to get 30-year-old rubber replaced. But I'm going to drain this out and catch you as soon as I get that piston cracked open. Alright, well, kind of knew this before, but I didn't realize what a big issue it was. This is a big crack, if you will. You could call it a ding, a bang, a smash, whatever you want to call it. But I would say this master cylinder is just about ready to be retired. I recognize there's this rubber boot that would probably protect it from spilling out oil, or, well, brake fluid in this case. But I'm just at the point in safety concern territory that it's at the very least going to minimize its ability to move back and forth. And it's possible this was actually the reason that the brake pedal was shot. So I'm going to go online, I'm going to order a new one. I'm not even going to bother taking this apart anymore. Maybe I'll just add it to my antique collection or something. And I guess that kind of concludes the video. I'll leave a link in the description when I find one. So far, I've had a lot of luck finding parts like this for a CB400 on Revzilla, 1990. It's the oldest OEM parts go on Revzilla, and considering this bike was never released here, I wouldn't expect them to have it anyways. But when I get that done, I'll add that link, and I won't bother taking this apart, but I'll use it for parts if I have to. And that concludes this video. Thanks for watching.